Does spending something like $12 billion a year on airport security actually protect you? Or are you basically just stuck in a really expensive, really frustrating line for a show?
That's pretty much the core question we're digging into today. We're looking at sources that suggest that massive TSA budget. It might be mostly about visible stuff, things that don't necessarily stop the real threats.
And those threats seem to be shifting, right? So we've got research here looking at, well, how effective the TSA really is, the pretty troubling history of aviation regulation before that, and how these sophisticated adversaries are now looking at, well, totally different targets, critical infrastructure.
Exactly. Our mission here is pretty clear. Our federal agencies spending taxpayer money on what some call security theater, making things look safe, while maybe ignoring the deeper, more critical vulnerabilities, especially with these newer hybrid attacks we're seeing.
It's kind of ironic when you think about flying today. We're taking off shoes, worrying about water bottles, policies based on threats from, what, nearly 25 years ago.
Right. And the sources we looked at point out that the biggest security wins since 9/11 were, well, essentially free.
You mean like the locked cockpit doors?
Locked cockpit doors, exactly. And maybe even more important, just the awareness now among passengers that, you have to fight back. Those were huge changes.
Structural and behavioral things didn't cost billions in bureaucracy.
Precisely, unlike the TSA's whole setup. So yeah, we need to unpack why, historically, big safety rules in aviation only seem to happen after a disaster, after the tombstones pile up.
And how that same mindset might be making us miss the mark on today's threats.
Okay, so let's start with the TSA itself. Is it, a genuine shield?
Yeah.
Or just a very expensive way to manage perceptions?
Well, that $12 billion figure, it's hard to ignore. One source put it in perspective, said the entire cost of the Afghanistan war, like $2 trillion, could fund the TSA for, get this, 1,600 years.
Wow, that's staggering when you put it like that.
It really is. And you'd hope for that kind of money, you're getting, near perfect results.
But the sources suggest otherwise. Things like the water bottle rule, taking off your shoes if you're not in pre-check.
Yeah.
They're often described as, well, theatrics. Performative.
Designed to be seen, maybe? Not necessarily to be effective.
That's the argument. And we've all had those awkward pat-downs, right?
Yeah.
Triggered by something completely harmless, like the sources meant, even medical devices like IUDs setting things off.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you look at the actual testing. It's kind of terrifying. Independent tests back in 2017 found agents could sneak weapons through TSA checkpoints more than half the time.
More than half. So basically a coin toss.
Pretty much. That suggests a pretty fundamental problem, doesn't it?
It does. And often the sources say the weak link isn't the scanner, it's the person operating it, the human factor. They point to this really chilling example of an insider threat. Someone got an IED, an explosive device, inside a laptop, past screening, because another vetted insider handed it to them.
So if you can't trust the screeners themselves, the whole system breaks down.
Exactly. Which, leads some experts in the materials to suggest pretty radical alternatives.
Like what?
Well, either shifting security back to the airlines themselves, they certainly have a stake in safety and efficiency, or maybe replacing the current model with highly trained professionals focused on spotting suspicious behavior, not just searching bags for, nail clippers.
It definitely makes you wonder about where the money's going. And zooming out, there's this conservative viewpoint highlighted in one source.
Right. They draw this contrast. They ask, why spend billions meticulously screening citizens for minor items?
While, and this is their allegation in the source material, thousands of people might be crossing the southern border daily without the same level of scrutiny.
Yeah, they use that comparison to argue that maybe the federal government's security priorities are, let's say, fundamentally misaligned. We're just outlining their specific point here.
Okay. And that sense of misalignment, or maybe just frustration with big bureaucracy, it didn't start with the TSA, did it?
Oh, definitely not. To understand why we default to these kinds of expensive reactive systems, you really have to look back at the history of aviation regulation. Before TSA, you have to look at the FAA.
The Federal Aviation Administration, and it earned itself a pretty grim nickname, right?
Yeah. The Tombstone Agency.
Oof. Why that name?
It's cynical, but the sources argue it was earned. It basically means the FAA historically needed a major crash, needed people to die, before they'd reluctantly put in new safety rules.
And why the reluctance?
Almost always cost. protecting the airline's bottom line. Remember, the FAA has this awkward dual mandate.
Right. They have to promote aviation and regulate its safety. That sounds like a built-in conflict of interest.
It absolutely is, and it led directly to tragedies. The classic awful example is ValueJet Flight 592 back in '96.
That was the crash in the Everglades, right? Terrible.
Yeah, 110 people killed, caused by a fire in the cargo hold because of improperly handled chemical oxygen generators, undeclared dangerous goods.
And the truly maddening part, reading the sources, is that the FAA kind of knew this was a risk, didn't they? For years.
For 8 years. The NTSB, the safety board, had been pushing the FAA since 1988 to mandate fire and smoke detectors in those cargo holds.
8 years of warnings. And the FAA response?
They refused, said the cost to the airlines, estimated around $350 million, was unjustifiable.
Unjustifiable.
And it gets worse. The safety files, they were literally stamped. Closed, unacceptable action.
Wow. Until 110 people died. Then suddenly the cost became acceptable, I assume.
That's the pattern. It's bureaucratic malpractice, prioritizing money over lives. And the sources show how they manipulated things to look better on paper, too.
How so?
Well, to make their safety records seem improved, the FAA actually cut the number of required inspections, dropped from over 100,000 in 1990 to just 44,000 by 1994.
Fewer inspections equals a better record. That's gaming the system.
Exactly, purely for optics. And at the same time, they started relying more and more on the industry to police itself.
So letting the fox guard the henhouse, basically.
Pretty much. They massively increased the number of surrogate inspectors. These are employees of the manufacturers, like Boeing, who certify their own company's work. By the early 90s, these surrogates were up 330%.
So the manufacturers are essentially signing off on their own safety.
Today, yeah, it's something like 95% of certification activities are run by the manufacturers themselves. It's a huge shift away from direct federal oversight.
And the sources even mentioned political pressure, right? Interfering with safety checks.
Absolutely. High-level officials apparently pushed to keep the Boeing 777 certification on schedule, even when safety concerns were raised. The priority was meeting deadlines, not necessarily ensuring safety first.
Okay, so the historical picture is not great. Slow, reactive, cost-conscious, sometimes politically influenced.
That's the pattern. And while this bureaucracy was stuck in its ways, focusing on physical checks at airports, the real threats started evolving dramatically.
Which brings us to the third part, this rising tide of hybrid threats, attacks aimed at our critical infrastructure.
Right. While we're busy taking off our shoes, adversaries are thinking bigger. They're targeting the things our society depends on: water, energy, communications, transport.
And these are hybrid threats. What does that mean exactly?
It means they combine different methods, often cyber attacks paired with physical disruption, or maybe economic manipulation. They're complex.
Like the Colonial Pipeline attack in 2021. That wasn't a bomb, it was ransomware.
Exactly. Purely a cyber attack.
Okay.
But it shut down a huge fuel pipeline, caused panic buying, massive real-world disruption, totally bypasses airport security.
And it's not just criminals. State actors are involved.
Oh, absolutely. The sources point to Russia using malware called Black Energy to actually shut down parts of Ukraine's power grid back in 2015.
Okay, but that was Ukraine.
True, but here's the scary part. The sources confirmed that same sophisticated malware had already been found targeting U.S. electric and water utilities. The homeland isn't sanctuary anymore.
Wow. So they're probing our systems, and the threat isn't always direct attack, is it? What about things like foreign investment?
Yeah, that's another angle. The sources discuss China's go-out strategy. It sounds benign, but it involves strategic investments.
Like buying ports.
Exactly. Buying control or significant influence in key infrastructure, like the Piraeus port in Greece, or acquiring companies that make critical dual-use technology, like a semiconductor firm mentioned, Dynex.
So the goal there?
Creating what the sources call strategic dependencies. If a potential adversary controls a major port, they could potentially hinder military movements, say for NATO, in a crisis. It's a long-term strategic play, much harder to see than a checkpoint line.
And then there are newer physical threats, too, like drones.
Definitely. Cheap, easy to get, and they can carry explosives or be used for surveillance. Remember those unauthorized drone flights over French nuclear plants back in 2014? That got people's attention.
Yeah. And these infrastructure attacks, they don't just cause physical damage, do they? There's a psychological impact.
Huge. Adversaries know this. They saw the PTSD and depression after 9/11, the mental toll of the pandemic. Attacking critical infrastructure creates widespread fear and panic, destabilizes society. They absolutely factor that psychological damage into their plans.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. We've seen a history with the FAA of prioritizing cost over safety, leading to a reactive approach. Then the TSA comes in, huge budget, but sources question its real effectiveness, calling it security theater.
Right, and while all that focuses on the physical checks at the airport, the actual threats are shifting, becoming more sophisticated, hybrid, targeting the fundamental systems we rely on: energy, water, finance, communication, using cyber attacks, strategic investment, drones.
The contrast is pretty stark, isn't it? $12 billion for a system that struggles with basic weapon detection, while state actors are practicing on our power grid and using economic means to gain strategic leverage.
It definitely raises serious questions about where our focus and resources should be.
So here's the thought maybe to leave you with. If big, centralized government agencies have consistently struggled to regulate safety effectively or adapt quickly to these new kinds of non-physical threats, should we be looking elsewhere, maybe more towards the private sector or local control to actually secure the things that matter most?
That's the really tough question, isn't it?
Right.
Because terrorists and adversaries adapt. They always look for the weakest point, the path of least resistance. If we keep building predictable physical defenses based on past attacks, are we just encouraging them to get smarter, more innovative, especially in that invisible cyber world? That's the challenge that goes way beyond any airport security line.